How's it going, everybody? My name is Austin Kiergard, and I am with Joe Klemczewski and Kevin Brunacini, and we are the Flexible Dieting Podcast. And today we're going to talk a little bit about flexible dieting, but flexible dieting on a budget. So, especially right now, I feel like it's a very sensitive topic when we're talking about food and groceries with costs and prices just going up. And I can understand when I'm talking to people in the gym or potential clients where they're like, I've just really struggled because it's just really hard to eat healthy foods. And it's just so much easier to get, the 89-cent canned whatever. So I'm going to run right with Joe on this because I know, Joe, you've shared a story with me a couple of times when you were discovering and trial and erroring flexible dieting. It was during school, if I remember. So obviously, college students or just anybody that's struggling on a budget, how do you make it work? How can you take flexible dieting, making sure we're getting foods that we need with a little bit of foods that we enjoy and still make sure that we can afford it and not have to feel like it's breaking the bank?
So that it truly was the genesis of flexible dieting, in that I'm sitting in an apartment in Indianapolis, going to school at the IU Med Center, and I decided to do a bodybuilding contest. I had done one previously, and I was going to wait till I was out of school, but something hit me that this is a good opportunity. This one, somewhat local, and I just had to go to big box stores, kind of like a Costco or Sam's, and get tuna by the case. I was getting rice by the 25-pound bag, anything that would reduce my cost. Even incidentally, kind of a funny story is you could get those, big tubs of animal cookie type things, and they're dirt cheap because it's just the grossest processed white flour possible, but they were somewhat low in fat. And I'm like, wow, I can put an ounce or two of these in a baggie and take them to class, and that's, kind of a get me through carb snack. So I was literally, with cases of even canned green beans, getting the cheapest food I possibly could, yet trying to cross or check all the boxes on quality that I could. And it was great. I mean, I did what I needed to do. I was making no bake protein powder cookies and things like that, just things that were very convenient, but absolutely the first item on the priority list was it had to be cheap.
Man, just watch the formation of flexible dieting right there, and I love it. Kevin, same kind of question to you with you and your journey. I know you've had quite the weight loss transformation journey that you shared. How about you? Did you ever find yourself that like food costs and stuff was just adding up and this was just getting crazy? And did you let that kind of slow you down, or how did you approach that with your own personal journey? And kind of to piggyback off that, how have you taken that approach with any clients that maybe have expressed cost in regards to food and stuff? Like how have you approached that?
Probably will answer both with my response, but I've not really been too concerned. And this really just sounds like a statement of privilege, and it is. But I've not really, thought much of what the food cost was, just because this was the rite of passage in my mind. This is what I have to do to make ends meet, to meet my goal. I guess it's just if this is what it takes and this is how important it is, then I'm willing to do that and spend what it is, or what it requires to get to that point. Is that necessary in retrospect? No, especially with what I know now of just flexible dieting principles, that I just not everything has to be quote unquote clean, or some premium hashtag or hyphen food. But at the time, that's what I thought. So, when it comes to clients, if it's valuable to them, if they want to spend that money, go, great. If they don't, then that's where there's still plenty of options that are still, follow the continuum of healthiness. And we just, I guess, do the best we can. Cause I have volunteered at local organizations that help individuals that may have been incarcerated or just having difficulty finding jobs, and I've been their consultant when it comes to health and medicine. And oftentimes, especially with when they learn of what I do, they expect they have to buy tons and tons of fruits and vegetables something organic, blah, 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 just stuff that is well, I wouldn't say fruit and vegetables are a premium necessarily, but they just have that expectation and perception that it's going to cost a lot when even if it might at first or seem like that is compared to just past habits, it's just a matter of, whatever you can afford and what you can buy nutritionally, whatever, even if it's McDonald's, let's just choose what the best option can be. Because if that's the context for the individual, then we have to work within that versus thinking, well, you have to buy all this crap, all these supplements in order to get that when you don't have to, unless you really want to. So that's a long-winded response, but I wanted to get both sides of the continuum that, from poor to rich, just if you want to do that, you can, but if you don't have those options or funds, then there are certainly ways to go about it, still be in a healthy way.
I appreciate that because you said like there is both sides. One, you both have echoed kind of the same thing. Like if your health is important to you, you're going to find a way, whether it's expensive or not. You're just going to find a way. Even if you only have a few foods to pick from because of cost, like you'll just find a way. Then there's also the other side of, there are people that just are in some difficult financial struggles and their health is not getting any better. So they want to make a change. So, but the food is expensive. So how do we combat that? So it's finding foods that, again, have maybe it's getting canned vegetables because they're cheaper. And one thing would be rinsing them off when you open them up to get off a little bit of the extra sodium so it's not so high in salt. And maybe it's buying frozen bagged chicken that's just a lot cheaper, or whatever, or animal crackers if you need to get something that's a quick carb source. But you both have said the same thing, like you find a way. And I think it's also worth talking in a couple different demographics. One, it might be families. Feeding families can be very tough. How do you feed a family with a flexible dieting approach? And like if your goals are flexible dieting and you're trying to do whatever and you're trying to feed your family, but again, cost is kind of tough. Or even for, a college student that's listening to this, that's like, I want to live a healthy life, but I'm just struggling to make ends meet at this point. So I'm going to throw it back to Joe, because you've got experience in both of these. How would you approach flexible dieting if you've got kids and you're worried about feeding kids first and then feeding yourself, and then any additional tips for the struggling college kid that's trying to make a healthy change?
I love the conversation steering in that direction, because both with familial needs, because I raised a family of 4 children and I come from a family of 5 children, but also I've done a lot of work, as Kevin said, with underprivileged communities and working to get, food deserts and so forth remedied. And unlike Kevin, who was rich and, ate on a golden dining room chair, I grew up eating government cheese and white bread and macaroni cheese. And so until you've had literally a ketchup sandwich, because you can't even afford bologna, so you take 2 pieces of 19-cent a loaf white bread and put ketchup on it, put another piece of white bread and eat that, then you can't talk to me about, living in poverty. And, all of that, to the point where I think most people will never have to face that. If you are even considering dieting and doing something with your discretionary income, getting healthier, gym membership, whatever it takes, you're probably not in that dire of straits. But it still can be done. And the reason I brought up that story is, to your question, Austin, I would do better than I think my parents did, because it was all about just cheap. If you're going to feed 5 kids, you've just got to get the cheapest calories. And I think you could still make room for some fruits, some vegetables. You can find a way to get those things, and it's still not as, hard on the family budget. But I also do understand that that is a true socio-demographic issue. And this is going to be how I'm going to answer that question, Austin. When people really don't have a lot of money, you don't have control over much of your life. You're constantly in stress. You constantly feel less than. You see people who do have a lot more than you. And even within your own psyche and within your own family, if you can eat well, then you do that. If you can buy that cheesecake, if you can get that ice cream, if you can get that quart of Hershey's chocolate syrup, because that's cheaper than a bag of apples, you'll do that because then you feel like, well, at least I have control over this. At least I can eat what I want to eat. And that has to be a very secondary and perhaps pushed aside value to the fact that I want to eat well. I want my children to be healthy. And so even if it costs a little more, even if I have to drive a little further, I'm at least going to prioritize that in our budget and get rid of some of those things that we just don't need, because you can still have health values and still do very well for your family without using that need for control as a driving factor that may complicate ill health.
Such a fantastic response. And I don't have kids yet, but I can relate on the coming up of, you know, my parents didn't have a lot of money at first, but to your point, they wanted us to eat well. So they worked their asses off to provide for my brother and I. And I'm thankful that they did that because we got to witness that. And they just, same thing, they just found a way to make it work. And so I can definitely appreciate that response. Kevin, I want to throw it back to you before we start kind of wrapping things up here. With kind of have you seen this, I guess, like with your clinical background, have you seen people struggling with like food? Like, yes, if they're in the hospital, they probably can get meals that day, but have you ever encountered anyone that's like, I just struggle to have access to food? And if so, like how did you approach something like that?
So going back quite a bit, this is when I worked in the hospital. I was, just out of undergrad from Evansville. There certainly were a lot of patients that had those circumstances, and frankly, they came to the hospital for the meal. I can't tell you what exactly. I mean, whether it's me being naive for that time and experience or lack of, versus just not wanting to ask and prod. I wish I had, but I don't know I don't know what was done other than just having social work or case management come and they speak to the patient and go from there in terms of resources. I don't know. That's fairly limited, unfortunately, but yes, there's a lot of inequities when it comes to that, and all the more reason for just the community resources, whether that's us or just, federal government, federal and state agencies to provide these resources. I really feel like I'm going to be going into a diatribe and I'm trying to prevent that. So I'll throw it back to you, but,
Oh, that's great. You kind of answered what I was looking for, like the agencies and there's programs. So, I mean, even trying to do a diet, like flexible dieting, like on a budget, like there are programs out there. Like if you are financially struggling, there are programs like the SNAP program, there's like the Meals on Wheels program. Like there are programs out there, and there's even fitness programs out there too. So it's one of those things that people are listening and they are in that situation. Like there are programs available, and you probably could do a little bit of research to put yourself into that direction to get you going, even where you can start to get a little bit more fruit in the diet and things like that. So there are programs, there's a lot of opportunities to still eat food that you need, that our body requires, even if it's on a budget. So I appreciate both of your guys' responses to this. I think people are going to get a lot out of this video. At least I hope so. And we will see you all in the next Flexible Dieting podcast. Thank you, guys.